Go ahead and look at each one in a little bit more depth. So the first technique is the idea of exaggerating something. And exaggeration in any way is to increase or enlarge something beyond the normal bounds of it. And once we've exaggerated something, that draws attention to it. And so, for example, we see on the screen there the idea of caricatures. And these are the artists you might see at some sort of state fair or the mall or something like that, where they say, hey, sit down, we'll draw your picture. They look at you and they say, this person's got some big ears or a big chin or very pointy ears or something. And maybe they take those features and they distort them. They exaggerate them in order to draw attention to it. Now that could be for a variety of literary reasons, but the point we're going to be exploring is the author exaggerating something in order to point out fault with that text? So we get an example like this. We have a political cartoon, and the author has chosen to exaggerate the features of the character who's supposed to be George Bush there. George Bush, known for kind of a big front lip and then pointy ears. This artist has exaggerated those to make him look a little silly, and then combine those with the rest of the visual image in order to make his or her point about what he felt George Bush should have done heading into this recession. Another example here, caricaturing Obama, and then to the left of the picture, Joe Biden. Again, taking their features, the big forehead on Biden, the kind of big cheeks and exaggerating those, and then taking the Obama figure, squishing his head, but again, keeping the big ears, and kind of the pensive look, the eyes closed, very thoughtful, taking those and exaggerating them. So our job would be A, acknowledge that exaggeration is happening, B, direct our attention to where we should, and then C, trying to figure out what are they doing with that exaggeration? What's their point? And ideally, as we focus through these examples, their effort is on satirizing something. Another great technique that satirists use is the idea of irony. Now, we have a whole separate podcast series on irony, so I don't want to recreate the wheel here. But in general, irony is the idea of expecting A, but getting B. So, for example, the fitness center. One would expect A, which is, I want to go to a fitness center to work out, to get better, to improve myself. Therefore, I would take the stairs. That helps me get better. Instead, we actually get B, which is the idea of having an escalator move you up to the fitness center. That is somewhat situationally ironic. We also have dramatic irony, and again, this is where the audience knows something more than characters in the text do. And then we have the third form, which is verbal irony. This is where you say something, but you mean the opposite. And sarcasm is a form of verbal irony, but it adds a level of tone to it. So you could say something but mean the opposite, and that's kind of what we see in satire, where authors may say something like, yes, we should eat the children in order to help the population. What they really mean is quite different, which is, maybe we should fix poverty, so we don't even have to have this conversation. So it's kind of confusing because they're saying verbally, we should do this, but they mean the opposite. Sarcasm, which is a branch of verbal irony, goes that step farther to be pretty mean and pointed as they try and be a little bit ironic. Another technique that is used is the idea of burlesque. And this is where we have some sort of ridiculous exaggeration and distortion. And if you can see in the middle there, this is where a very serious subject might be treated in a lighthearted manner, or something that really isn't all that big a deal is treated in a very serious manner. So for example, if we wanted to talk about the serious issue of nuclear war and how that could cause mass destruction and kill so many people, yet we make a joking little lighthearted piano song about it, that could be burlesque.
Yes, we all will go together when we go. We will all go together when we go. All suffused with an incandescent glow. No one will have the endurance to collect on his insurance. Lloyds of London will be loaded when they go.
On the flip side, if we take something that's not so serious like jaywalking and say, well, our punishment for jaywalkers should be, being tortured and lined with honey and bees placed on them, and then we shoot them out of a cannon or something. That could be burlesque also, because we're taking something that isn't that big of a deal socially, jaywalking, and then making it on par with something horrendous. And so we're taking it and flipping it, and that would be burlesque. Here's another one, incongruity, and to show how things are out of place or silly in relation to the surrounding in order to forward the message of satire. And so we can look at different film clips there, but one thing that kind of sticks out is the idea of the show Wife Swap, where this show's producers intentionally take almost polar opposite families and try to take the mothers of each and flip them. So creating this very incongruous situation where, for example, you have one family that is vegan, they eat nothing animal based. Then you have another family that eats fast food every single meal or something. The producers would then say, okay, take these two mothers and switch them. Put the vegan mother in the fast food house, put the fast food mother in the vegan house, and let's see all the craziness that comes out. That is, on the level, incongruity. If the producers are then trying to be satirical and try to point out a fault in society or ask for a change, then we have incongruity leading to satire. And so with each of these, we have to identify what the technique is and then see if authors are actually using it in a satirical manner. Another technique is the idea of reversal. And yes, this sounds very similar to incongruity. It sounds similar to irony. The technical definition of reversal is to present the opposite of the normal order. So what happens if we present dessert before dinner? What if we have children making all the decisions for a family? What if we have, like in Lord of the Flies, what if we have the children creating the government? What does that do for the message of that book? Another example, what if we have the lion and the mouse, where we would expect the lion to be all-powerful? But in this fable, isn't it the mouse that is able to free the lion once he's trapped? We've reversed the normal order. We've made the very weak mouse seem very powerful, and the very powerful lion seem very weak. So if we are reversing the normal order, that is the technique of reversal. One more technique here is the idea of parody. And this one you're probably pretty familiar with, you just may not know what it's called. And so parody is the idea of copying the technique or style of a person, place, or thing in order to make fun of it. And kind of the idea of being somewhat close to the original, but then tweaking it just enough in order to make fun of it. And then since we're looking at satire, if that poking of fun is to reveal a wrong or reveal some sort of comment on society, then we have satire. The challenge, as you can see at the bottom, is that the reader or the viewer must be somewhat familiar with the original for this to work, and we definitely liken this to an illusion. If you don't understand the background knowledge of an illusion, then the illusion falls apart. If we quote a line from Shakespeare as you're walking out the door and we say something like, "Parting is such sweet sorrow," we sound weird if you don't understand that that is a line from Romeo and Juliet. So, parody is very much like an illusion in that manner. So, here are some examples of parody. These are movies that parody some original style and then tweak it for a comedic effect. Date movie, epic movie, superhero movie, all of these take an original form, tweak it just slightly enough, and then it becomes a humorous look at that. So for example, the movie Meet the Spartans is clearly based on the graphic novel turned movie 300. The storyline's pretty much the same, the characters all dress the same, their names are the same, but they tweak it just enough to make it, hopefully, funny or a parody of that original. In the audio world, you have Weird Al Yankovic. He's taken tons of songs and made parodies of them. He's taken Michael Jackson's Beat It, and he made Eat It. He took Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and it becomes Girls Just Want to Have Lunch. And it's not just that he's manipulating the title in a parody scenario. The entire song that Yankovic creates is a parody of the original. And that the tune is the same, the beat, the meter, the sound, the tempo, the structure, everything is basically the same. All he does is change the wording on it. That becomes parody, because he's kind of making fun of the structure, of the artists, of the themes, and then he's adding his own level of theme over the top of that. So let's take a break from the techniques and start to apply some of these. And one pretty famous application of satire is in the form of either The Daily Show or more specifically The Colbert Report from Comedy Central. But before we can understand Colbert as a satire, we have to look at the original text that he is satirizing. So, we go back to the idea of political pundit shows. These are shows that have come out within the last maybe 5, 6, 8 years, something like that, that aren't news. They look like news because you get kind of these middle-aged white people that are giving commentary about news. They dress like newscasters. They often have sets that look like news sets. They talk about news items. But what these political pundit shows do is that they deviate from the news and that they just aren't news. They are these particular people's opinions. They are opinions given on the news from both ends of the political spectrum. You have the Ed Show and the Rachel Maddow Show, which tend to be overly liberal perspectives on the news. And then you have Rush Limbaugh, Ann Coulter, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck, all overly opinionated to the political right about the news. So these shows have come up that are masquerading as news, but are clearly opinion shows. So that's our original text, this idea of a political pundit show. But then we get this seemingly funny, conservative show just like that in the form of the Colbert Report, where he seems to have the same qualities as the last slide. Middle-aged, white guy, looking a certain way, having a set, sounding like he's talking about the news. The challenge is, he is satirizing or making fun of these other overly opinionated shows. So think through this example. You watch the Colbert Report. There is a report on government spending. The character of Stephen Colbert encourages the government to spend more. He completely exaggerates about how much more he wants them to spend. And we have to ask ourselves, is Colbert really saying he wants the government to spend more? Or is he using exaggeration to draw attention to that? And when he really says that, he means the opposite. I think that's what we get in terms of Colbert, that he is satirizing political pundit shows through all of the normal techniques, trying to poke fun at those shows and to poke fun at the news, government, individuals, that kind of stuff. And so this sentence frame that you see at the top of this slide, I think really is the holy grail in terms of figuring out satire and how to explain satire. And so just as is, that blank is satirizing blank by using blank techniques because he or she wants to see some kind of change. And so if we go back and fill that in based on our Colbert example, we see that Colbert is satirizing the federal government, because he's poking fun at the federal government, by using the technique of parody of political pundit shows, because he, as a character, wants to see spending amounts decrease or perhaps change their focus. So if you can fill in all of these lines when you look at a piece of satire, you're probably well on your way to being able to explain how it is satire and what techniques are being used. If at any point you can't figure out one of these blanks, then you have a problem. You have to figure out, what are they truly making fun of? And then why are they making fun of it? And then lastly, how are they making fun of it? Once you can fill in all those blanks, I think you have a good framework from which to discuss satire. So that's about it. Again, satire is the idea of poking fun at something, text, person, institution, whatever, in order to show that you think there's a fault and or that you think something should change. And then how you create that satire are all in the techniques that we showed you, exaggeration or use of irony or use of parody. And then ultimately, what do we want to see changed? I think that's about it. If you have any questions, please bring those in the class. We'll get those shored up for you. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and we will see you soon.